While preparing for the wedding, I overheard my fiancé talking to his childhood friend. After meeting her, he admitted that the past 7 years with Yuki had just been about settling. His childhood friend reassured him, saying Yuki was fine for marriage, just something to make do with. I called off the wedding. It had been me who had been eager to marry, but now it was him who seemed desperate. The thought of spending my entire life just settling for something makes me sick. After the engagement banquet, Caleb wanted to have a meal with his brothers alone. When I dropped him off at the restaurant and went to park the car, I realized he had forgotten the wine in the trunk. I parked the car and brought the wine up for him. Unexpectedly, I overheard him talking to his brothers. After meeting her, he realized that the past years with Yuki were just about settling. His brothers comforted him, saying Yuki was the one for marriage, just to settle for. I held tightly to the wine box to stop myself from crying in the hallway as people walked by. Hearing the sound of chairs moving, it seemed someone was getting up, preparing to leave. I quickly hid in an empty private room next door. My phone buzzed with a call from Caleb. When I answered, I noticed how strange my voice sounded, but he didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he chose not to. "Baby, have you driven far?" "I forgot the wine in the trunk. Can you come back and bring it to me?" "Thanks, baby. Love you." After hanging up, I couldn't help but smile with disgust. How revolting. He clearly didn't love me, yet he was still calling me baby and saying he loved me. I handed the wine to the front desk and asked them to deliver it. As I got back into the car, I felt like a weight had been lifted, and I collapsed onto the steering wheel, crying loudly. Afterward, I felt eerily calm, as if I had already predicted this would happen. The Pandora's box I had been too afraid to open had finally been opened. I had suspected something for a while, but never had solid proof, thinking it was just my insecurities playing tricks on me. Looking back now, I realize I didn't want to face the truth. The man who had loved me for 7 years no longer did. They say a woman's intuition is always right, and at some point I began to feel that Caleb was hiding something from me. Several times when he came home, he would sit in the car for ages. Once I went downstairs to throw out the trash and saw him sitting in the car, his phone screen glowing on his face with a clear smile. When I approached, he got out without hiding the smile and pulled me into his arms. "What were you looking at?" "You're smiling like that," I asked. He unlocked his phone and a funny video shared by his childhood friend popped up. It was so casual. How could I ever have suspected him? Another time, I noticed in his shopping app that there were 2 Valentine's gifts ordered for me. I asked him about it, and he explained that he had spent a long time picking the gift and accidentally ordered one twice. When I got the extra item, I returned it. Seeing my doubtful expression, he showed me the refund receipt, which seemed genuine. I should have believed him, but Caleb was the type to double-check everything. Even restaurant bills were thousands. So how could he not have noticed that he paid for 2 gifts? Looking back, there were too many red flags, but Caleb was always so careful. I couldn't catch any mistakes. Eventually, my doubts eroded my sense of security. I foolishly thought that once we were married, everything would be fine. After all, we had been together for 7 years. I didn't want my suspicions and doubts to push him away. But when I finally suggested getting married, Caleb hesitated, which made me feel even more insecure. He always had reasons to explain himself, and his logic made me question whether I was asking for too much. Over time, marriage became my obsession. This led to 2 big arguments. Later, when we were having dinner with Caleb's parents, his mother asked me if I had any thoughts on getting married. I nodded, saying I was considering it. That night, Caleb gave me the silent treatment. I realized that his mother was pushing for us to marry, and by agreeing, I had given her the chance to pressure Caleb into finalizing everything. I had always cared deeply for Caleb because he had given me so much warmth in the past. I still remember when, back in high school, I was bullied on the playground. My white uniform was soaked, clinging to my body as the others laughed and pointed. Caleb was the one who stepped forward, draped his coat over me, and told me he'd talk to the teacher so I could go back to the dorm and change. He even warned me to be careful not to catch a cold. After that incident, we didn't interact much since Caleb and I attended different universities, but we worked part-time at the same fast food restaurant. I thought it was fate that brought us together. There was one time when I was delivering food and a customer harassed me. I was too shy to say anything, but Caleb stepped in to help. Because of this, he was fired from the restaurant. That moment made me sure that I had feelings for him. My quiet admiration for Caleb turned into a secret love that lasted until graduation. I was afraid I would never get the chance to confess, so I decided to take a chance. But before I could, Caleb confessed first. "I like you," he said. In that moment, I felt incredibly lucky, even though I had never won a lottery or gotten a buy one, get one free offer. The person I loved also loved me. When we started dating, everyone said Caleb was good to me. Thoughtful, unique, and deeply caring. So when I thought I might lose his affection, I panicked and tried to hold on by pushing for marriage. I remember on Christmas Eve, Caleb came home looking dejected. I thought he was having trouble at work, so I went to comfort him. It was that night he told me he had made up his mind and wanted to marry me. Looking back, I now understand that Caleb knew he couldn't be with the other woman, which is why he decided to settle for me. I was just the backup, the one he would reluctantly spend his life with. When I got home, I looked at the wedding plans I had carefully arranged with excitement, but now it all felt hollow. I called the wedding planning company, the hotel, and the group and notified them that the wedding was canceled. Caleb wasn't in the group chat. He thought there were too many details to confirm, so he left it all to me to handle. Annoyed, he left the group. I smiled bitterly. If I hadn't said anything, he probably wouldn't have known the wedding was off until the day it was supposed to happen. It felt like saying goodbye as I walked around the small apartment we had shared for less than 2 years. I ran my fingers over the things we had placed together, but it seemed pointless now. I didn't know when or who Caleb had fallen in love with, but at least when we moved in and decorated our home, he had likely pictured a future with me. As I touched a photo frame on the shelf, it fell, shattering to the ground. It was the first photo of us together, with me smiling broadly and Caleb looking at me with loving eyes. As I knelt to pick it up, I noticed another photo partially exposed underneath. I carefully moved the broken glass and retrieved the hidden photo. The moment I saw it, my blood ran cold, and I collapsed to the ground, my hand landing on the glass shards, cutting my palm. The photo in my hand contained Caleb on the basketball court with a girl sitting on the steps behind him. His shy, blushing smile was unmistakable, showing just how nervous he was, even though the photo was poorly aligned. And that girl? How could I not recognize her? She was Vivian, a well-known figure in our high school. On the first day of freshman year, her photos were all over the school's bulletin boards, and she was hailed as the school's beauty. Not only did she come from a wealthy family, but she excelled academically, was multi-talented, and stunningly beautiful. She seemed like the perfect character from a novel. However, she transferred to another school after the first semester of sophomore year. The reason I was bullied in high school was because I resembled Vivian. After she left, several girls who had envied her took their frustration out on me. I didn't have Vivian's charm or fortune. I was just an ordinary, shy student with average grades. Once, our head teacher even remarked, "Why do you look so much like that top student, but your grades don't match up?" During the bullying, I lacked the courage to speak up, and I didn't want to worry my parents, so I silently endured it. In hindsight, though, this incident became a small part of my luck because, if not for it, Caleb wouldn't have stood up for me on the playground, and we would never have had our first interaction. Looking at the photo now, tears dripped onto it, blurring the ink. It dawned on me. Caleb had liked Vivian. Perhaps he helped me on the playground because he couldn't stand to see someone with a face so similar to Vivian's being bullied. He had hidden that photo of him and Vivian behind our picture in the frame. Could it be that, all along, he had only seen me as a substitute for Vivian? After realizing this secret, I was stunned. Vivian's shadow had been present in many aspects of our relationship. For example, every bouquet of flowers and bracelet Caleb gave me had Love Pea elements. Even the themes for our engagement banquet and wedding were connected to love peas. I had once asked him why love peas always appeared in the flowers he gave me, especially when we weren't in a long-distance relationship. Caleb had explained, "Even if we're apart for just half a day, I'll miss you terribly." Now, I realized that Caleb's love for love peas probably stemmed from Vivian, who had once sung a song called Red Bean at the school anniversary show. I had heard that before transferring schools, Vivian had given each of her classmates a love pea. It turns out that the person Caleb had missed all along wasn't me, but Vivian. There was also the matter of his preference for me to wear long hair and simple, elegant dresses. One summer, I cut my hair short and switched to fresher, more work appropriate outfits. When I first tried this new look, my colleagues and friends said I looked much better. Wanting to surprise Caleb, I waited for him outside his office after work. But when he saw me, his first reaction was to pull me aside to avoid his colleagues who were coming out. He looked me up and down, joking that I looked like a tomboy and appeared 10 years older. But I could tell from his facial expression that he was truly disgusted. My colleagues and friends said I looked much better with short hair, but those were just polite comments. They weren't close to me, and only those who truly cared would be honest. As a result, during that time, I became extremely anxious about my appearance. I tried eating all kinds of foods and health products to make my hair grow faster. Sometimes I even considered pulling it to speed up the process. But the truth was, I wasn't ugly. I had just ruined the image of Vivian in Caleb's mind. Another example was the engraving inside my wedding ring. When I took the ring off, a scratch appeared on my knuckle due to the force, and blood started to seep out. The engraving read, 5201-1224, December 24th, Christmas Eve, the day Caleb had finally agreed to marry me. At first, I didn't understand. Most people engrave a partner's birthday, but Caleb had said, "I think the day we decided to commit to each other for life is more important." I was so naive that I believed him without questioning it. But if I remember correctly, Vivian's birthday is also December 24th. On Christmas Eve, during the first year of high school, I faintly heard birthday songs coming from the next classroom during evening study time. Later, I learned that it was for Vivian. How foolish I had been, thinking I was the one Caleb truly loved. If I count from the day he helped me on the playground, we had been together for 13 years. Over those years, Caleb had never truly loved me. He had always loved the memory of Vivian, seeing her in me. As I cleaned up the broken glass on the floor and tended to the wound on my hand, I packed my bags. I waited for Caleb to return. Although part of me wanted to get back at him and expose his fickleness at the wedding, hoping he would publicly admit his true feelings, I couldn't do that. No matter how much Caleb had hurt me, his mother had been kind to me. When she found out about my family's financial struggles, she not only supported my relationship with Caleb, but even lent me money when my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer and needed urgent treatment. Vivian, too, was part of Caleb's close circle of friends from high school. Everyone knew he was still in love with her. I didn't want to involve her in this mess. She was innocent. So I decided it was better to tell Caleb face to face that I was canceling the engagement, parting on good terms and preserving some dignity for him. The doorbell rang. Caleb was carried inside by his two friends, Cooper and Malachi. Cooper smiled sheepishly and said, "Sister-in-law? Sorry, we made Caleb drink too much." As they helped him inside, Cooper turned to me and asked, "Where should we put Caleb? On the sofa or the bed?" I waved my hand, fanning the smell of alcohol away from my nose, and frowned. I went to open the balcony door to let in fresh air. "Put him anywhere," I replied. "If he throws up, the floor is easier to clean than the sofa or bed." Cooper and Malachi exchanged a glance and finally chose to lay Caleb on the sofa. Before leaving, they tried to make excuses. "Sister-in-law, please don't be mad. We haven't all hung out like this in ages. We were just so happy we had a bit too much to drink. On your wedding day, we'll definitely help Caleb handle the alcohol." I glanced at the wedding planning folder I had just tossed into the trash. Caleb and I hadn't gotten married yet. "Don't call me sister-in-law," I said coldly. "It's getting late. You should head back now." I went to the door and opened it, signaling for them to leave. Cooper and Malachi, looking a little uncomfortable, hurried out, apologizing. I watched them go, feeling disgusted. These were the people who knew everything, yet had remained silent about Caleb's feelings all along. It became clear to me that I had been covering up for Caleb all along, pretending that someone else held a place in his heart. But now I realized I had only been deceiving myself. When I recalled how Caleb's brothers spoke at the engagement banquet about how much he loved me, I had felt so elated at the time. Now, however, I suspected they had only seen me as a fool and were probably laughing at my naivety. Caleb was so intoxicated that he repeatedly mumbled my name, telling me how much he loved me. It was revolting, truly revolting. After so long of thinking of me as someone else, he had truly come to see me as her. Seeing how deeply drunk he was, I knew there was no way I could explain things to him tonight. So I quietly went into the room, pushed the suitcase out, left the wedding ring on the coffee table, and walked out. It was almost 1 a.m. when I arrived back at my parents' house. As soon as I stepped through the door, I found my mother sitting on the sofa, crafting handmade souvenirs under the warm, yellow light. She was startled when she saw me and accidentally pricked her finger with the embroidery needle. I quickly rushed over, grabbed some tissues, and pressed them onto her bleeding finger. As I did, I noticed the material packages spread out across the coffee table and a small basket of finished items beside them. These were the commemorative dolls she had made for Yinning. When our family had faced financial difficulties, my mother had made these dolls and set up a stall outside the ancient town of Yinning to sell them. Mom, you're not feeling well. Why are you staying up so late making these? I asked, while tidying up the things on the table. Where's Dad? Why didn't he stop you? Your dad is asleep, my mother replied, her eyes still on the suitcase behind me. Her smile faded into concern. Did you have a fight with Caleb? Actually, my parents were very fond of Caleb, especially after hearing about his part-time jobs in high school and college. They had joked many times that I was really lucky to have him, thinking it was a blessing I had earned from a past life. After my mother's illness, Caleb's mother had lent us a significant sum for medical expenses without hesitation. My parents even thought I had truly found a wonderful family. Now, looking into my mother's worried eyes, I found it hard to speak the words I had planned on the way home. How could I tell them that the wonderful son-in-law they admired was neither a good man, a good husband, nor the person they thought he was? How could I explain that for 13 years their beloved daughter had been nothing but a stand-in for someone else? Just as I was about to speak, I heard the door open again. I turned and saw my father, who should have been sleeping in his room, standing in the doorway wearing a frog costume. He was holding the headpiece in one hand and a bunch of frog balloons in the other. The town was really lively today, he said with a pleased grin. I sold 30 balloons tonight. After changing his shoes, he turned around and froze when he saw me. He quickly hid the headpiece behind his back, a little embarrassed. Yuki's home, he said hurriedly, taking off the costume. But the white t-shirt underneath was drenched in sweat, sticking to his body. It had been so hot in Yinning, with the temperature reaching nearly 40 degrees Celsius during the day, and the humidity was unbearable at night. Yet my father had spent the entire night in that thick costume. Dad, Yuki, don't be mad, he said, still trying to catch his breath. Mom's illness is expensive, so our family can't afford to give you a proper dowry. That's why Mom makes these dolls to help out. Caleb's mom has already helped so much, and Mom doesn't want you to feel embarrassed after you marry into their family. His words, though meant to comfort, made the difficult words I had been planning to say feel even harder to speak. I feared that she might not be able to handle it all at once. Mom, Caleb's mom won't look down on me. You know she likes me, I reassured her. Yes, I know, my mother said, tears glistening in her eyes. Her expression softened as if she felt some relief. She lovingly tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. At that moment, my father, now dressed in dry clothes, emerged holding a red box wrapped in cloth. He opened it, revealing a pair of dragon and phoenix bracelets, looking pleased with himself. Look, we added another DIY gift for you. How nice, right? Tears welled up in my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away, not wanting my parents to misunderstand. I gently pushed the box away, trying to keep my emotions in check. What's so special about this? Mom's still sick, and we need money. Why did you buy this? Yuki, your mother's treatment, the money we borrowed from Caleb's mom, and your dowry. All these things are important, my father replied, carefully closing the jewelry box and wrapping it up with cloth again. You're our only daughter. No matter how tough things get, we'll make sure you have a grand wedding. His smile deepened as he spoke, and his eyes creased with the effort. Suddenly, my mother seemed to remember something important. She grabbed my hand, her face full of concern. Why did you come back by yourself so late at night with a suitcase? Did you have a fight with Caleb? I wiped my tears away and told a lie, trying to make her feel better. No, I didn't. I just needed to come back for a week before the wedding. I brought back some clothes I don't wear often. Caleb's having a party with his friends, and I got bored at home, so I decided to come back. The drive from Caleb's house to my parents' place was less than an hour, and I often visited without notice, so my parents didn't suspect anything. Next time, even if you want to come back, don't come so late. It's too dangerous, my mother lectured, letting out a sigh of relief. I know, I said, snuggling into her arms and acting coy. Mom chuckled. You're still the same as when you were little, she said, stroking my back. The scene of our family of three, bathed in the warm yellow light, felt so comforting. After a while, I couldn't help but ask, Mom, Dad, do you really like Caleb that much? What if I don't marry him? As soon as I asked the question, my mother's hand on my back stopped moving, and I felt a wave of nervousness rise in me. Just as I was about to explain I was just joking, my dad responded seriously. If you're not married yet and you don't want to marry him, your mom and I will definitely support you. But if you're already married and then say you regret it and want a divorce, then I won't be nice to you. I was taken aback for a moment, and then my heart swelled with emotion. Tears nearly spilled over as I heard his words. Yuki, why are you asking this all of a sudden? My mom asked, her face full of confusion. Didn't you always want to marry Caleb? I was just making an assumption, with Dad's permission. I replied softly. The moment I heard those words, my resolve strengthened. I realized I couldn't keep walking down the wrong path just because I feared worrying my parents, as that would only cause them more anxiety in the future. However, I decided it was best not to tell them everything right now. I would wait until things were clearer. By the way, Lasong, didn't we agree to put all the betrothal gifts from Caleb's family into the dowry and have me return them? I had planned to go to the bank today to deposit the money, but since it's the weekend, the bank is closed, and I heard we need an appointment now. It's all so inconvenient. Go ahead and withdraw the money, my mom said, lowering her head. You can deposit it into the card when you're free tomorrow. It'll be too troublesome to carry so much cash then. Dad immediately stood up and went into the room. He came back holding a box of money and handed it to me. I couldn't help but feel my face flush again. I knew my parents didn't really want me to deposit the money, but they were leaving the decision of where the betrothal gifts would go to me, whether I would keep them and marry Caleb or return them and break off the engagement. With my parents' support, I slept deeply that night. The next morning, I received a message from Caleb on WeChat. Sorry, baby. I drank too much last night. Are you angry? Where are you? Why did you leave the wedding ring behind? Don't you care about me anymore? Yuki, no matter what, don't keep talking about breaking up. Didn't you say I haven't hung out with my friends for a long time? You knew I'd drink last night. What's the big deal now? Call me back immediately. As I read the annoying words, full of baby and darling, I, who hadn't eaten anything the night before, felt my stomach churn. But when I saw his frustration and the way he was acting out of embarrassment, I slowly began to feel better. Yes, this was his real face. I replied to Caleb and suggested we meet at a coffee shop near his office around noon. As soon as I sent the message, I got a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was soft and gentle, just like her singing voice. It was Vivian. She asked if we could meet, and since I was already going to see Caleb soon, I arranged to meet Vivian at the same coffee shop afterward. I didn't have any direct connection with Vivian, but due to Caleb, we had become somewhat reluctantly linked. I wasn't sure why Vivian wanted to meet me, but as I walked there, I imagined many different possibilities. I arrived 10 minutes early, but to my surprise, Vivian was already there. When I entered the coffee shop, she stood up from her seat, smiling and waving at me. She still looked just as elegant, beautiful, and captivating as she had in high school. I gathered myself and walked toward her, holding my head high and greeting her with a slightly exaggerated manner. However, after I sat down, Vivian took a sip of her coffee, looking a little uncomfortable. She seemed nervous. I decided to break the silence first. I'm not sure why you wanted to meet me today. What's going on? I asked. Vivian put down her cup and gently wiped her mouth with a napkin. After a moment, as if she was finally gathering her courage, she began speaking slowly. I saw the news about your engagement to Caleb on our class WeChat moments. Actually, everyone told me not to get involved, but maybe I'm just being nosy. So I thought I'd try to get in touch with you. I nodded, acknowledging her words, and waited for her to continue. Caleb and I were classmates in the first year of high school. Vivian went on. Then I transferred to another school, went abroad for studies, and later returned to work. By coincidence, I had a work relationship with Caleb again. She hesitated before looking at me. He started pursuing me because our law firm had to collaborate with Caleb for a while. I didn't reject him clearly at first because I was trying to avoid any awkwardness. But over 2 months ago, I found out that he already had a girlfriend, someone he had been with for many years. I immediately rejected him and told him not to contact me anymore. I didn't even accept any of the gifts he gave me. Vivian waved her hands nervously as though trying to clarify things. I suddenly remembered the Valentine's Day gift Caleb had ordered 2 copies of, but returned one. At that moment, I understood why Vivian had come to meet me. I relaxed my shoulders a bit and no longer felt defensive. Vivian noticed my eyes welling up and quickly pulled out a tissue to hand it to me. I took it and smiled faintly. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," Vivian said, flustered. "I just thought you shouldn't be deceived by a scumbag and marry him. Her words tumbled out in a rushed and jumbled way, which almost made me laugh. I looked at Vivian's anxious face, which seemed oddly familiar because of the nervousness she was showing. Her cheeks were a bit flushed. As I recalled the way I had imagined Vivian would try to force me to give up Caleb, I suddenly felt guilty. I sighed deeply and said, "Actually, Caleb has liked you for a long time, since the first year of high school. The reason he was with me is that I remind him of you, and I only found this out yesterday." Vivian probably only knew about Caleb's tendency to juggle relationships, but she had no idea he had been using me as a substitute for her. Her brows furrowed in anger, and she seemed upset. "What? So, do you still plan on marrying him?" she asked, her voice tight with emotion. I shook my head. I've made an appointment with him later to break off the engagement. After meeting Vivian, I waited in the coffee shop for a while. Then I saw Caleb rushing in, looking disheveled and clearly suffering from a hangover. As soon as he sat down, he started tugging at his tie and complaining. "You knew I drank too much, but you just left me sleeping on the sofa all night. You didn't even make me any hangover soup, and my head is killing me this morning," he said. Normally, I would have apologized and felt sorry for him when he complained like this. But today, as soon as he sat down, I crossed my arms and looked at him coldly. It was the first time I realized just how much of a jerk I had been in love with. Seeing that I wasn't responding and was giving him the cold shoulder, Caleb impatiently took out the wedding ring and placed it in front of me. "If you throw the ring around carelessly again, I'll really get angry," he warned. "But I won't hold it against you this time." I lowered my gaze to the ring and asked, "What does 520112224 mean?" Caleb was clearly taken off guard by my question. He hesitated for a moment before quickly responding. "Didn't I tell you? It's the day we decided to get married." I sneered, took out a photo from my bag, and slammed it onto the table, pushing it toward him. When Caleb saw the photo, he froze. It took him a long time to look up at me. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. I smiled as I responded, "You put this photo on the shelf facing the bed in our bedroom. Where else would I have gotten it? Of course, it's from there. Caleb, December 24th. Christmas Eve. Vivian's birthday is also on December 24th. Caleb, confronted with my question, was left speechless. He immediately tore the photo into pieces. "No, December 24th is the anniversary of when we decided to get married," he insisted. I shook my head and gave him a mocking smile. "December 24th is Vivian's birthday, and it's also the day she officially rejected you and told you to stop bothering her." Caleb seemed taken aback, as if surprised that I knew this, but he still lied and tried to shift the blame onto me. "Yuki, what nonsense are you talking about? I haven't seen Vivian in ages. If you want to break up, just say it directly. Don't make up things to frame me. Did someone tell you something?" He reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled it away in disgust, suddenly standing up. The chair fell backward with a loud noise, drawing the attention of several people in the restaurant. This coffee shop also served simple meals, so there were quite a few workers from the building coming down for lunch, including some of Caleb's colleagues. Thinking it would be too troublesome to carry a box of cash, I had gone to the bank before coming to the coffee shop and deposited the betrothal gifts into my bank account. Now, I threw the bank card with the betrothal gifts onto the table in front of Caleb. "Here's the betrothal gift from your family. I'm returning it. Caleb, I want to break off our engagement." After saying that, I turned to leave, but Caleb grabbed my arm. "Yuki, do you even know what you're saying? You were the one eager to get married before. Now that the wedding's about to happen, you're doing this? Don't listen to other people's nonsense." I tried to break free, but Caleb was holding on too tightly. Not only could I not get away, but my wrist also started to hurt, growing numb from his grip. Just then, a hand in a black suit reached out from behind me and swiftly landed on Caleb's wrist. He immediately let go due to the pain, and I was finally freed. I turned around and saw Vivian, who had just left, returning. She stepped in front of me and pulled me behind a man she had brought with her, then shouted at Caleb. "Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, you know in your heart what kind of person you are, Caleb." Caleb hadn't expected Vivian to come back, and he quickly understood what was happening. However, his first reaction was still to deny everything, accusing Vivian instead. "Yuki, she's the one who pestered me before. Don't be fooled by her." Vivian, who was being smeared, stomped her foot in frustration. She was about to speak up, but the tall man beside her seemed to find something funny. "You? You think you're worthy of my girlfriend bothering you?" He glanced at Caleb and added, "Because of your slander just now, you'll definitely be receiving a lawyer's letter from me within 3 days." Vivian leaned in shyly but proudly and whispered in my ear, "This is my boyfriend." Then, as we were about to leave, she added, "When he learned that you were going to confront the scumbag, he got worried and came back to make sure you were safe." I gratefully took her hand, my voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you, Vivian." After Caleb was recognized by his colleagues and boss in the coffee shop, he hurriedly fled the scene. Vivian and her boyfriend Ethan then drove me home. On the way, I received a message from Caleb. "Yuki, let's have a proper talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Listen to my explanation carefully. Yuki, it's fine if you want to break up and call off the engagement, but you have to return the 150,000 yen that my mom lent to your mother for medical treatment. If not, you'll have to marry me. Do you think someone like you, with your family's condition, can find anyone better than me? What right do you have to break up with me? Where are you? If you don't reply, I'll go straight to your parents and tell them your family is cheating in the marriage." As my phone kept ringing, I opened it and Vivian leaned over to look at the messages. After reading them, she became so angry she almost jumped in the car. "That scumbag is actually threatening you to marry him?" Ethan happened to stop the car at a traffic light and glanced at the phone. "Yuki, our law firm is ranked first in Yuning, and we're second to none. If you need legal assistance, we're happy to provide you with free services." Hearing Ethan's confident yet charming words, Vivian blushed. Suddenly, I felt that meeting such a lovely couple because of Caleb was the only good thing he had brought into my life. "Thank you, Ethan. If I need help, I'll definitely reach out," I said, turning off my phone's screen. After a brief pause, I added, "Ethan, could you turn around and drive to S-Jing Community?" Without hesitation, Ethan nodded and drove us to S-Jing Community. Once Vivian learned that this was Caleb's mother's home, she grew a bit concerned. "Don't worry, Caleb's mom is really nice. I'll message you when I come out." When I arrived at Caleb's mother's house, she was surprised by my sudden visit, but quickly welcomed me inside. At that moment, she had no idea what had happened between Caleb and me, and still saw me as the daughter-in-law about to marry into the family. She was very skilled with her hands and was even cutting a paper decoration of the Chinese character for double happiness for the wedding. The tools for paper cutting were spread out on the table. Seeing her put so much effort into these things, my throat tightened with emotion. It was a shame that I didn't have the fate to be her daughter-in-law. I fought back tears as I said, "Auntie, I came here today because there's something I need to tell you." Seeing my trembling voice and red eyes, Auntie immediately put down her work and pulled me to sit down. "What happened? Did Caleb bully you? That boy, he's always been disobedient, even after getting engaged. I'll call him right now and scold him," Auntie said, pulling out her phone to make the call. But I quickly pressed it down. Just a moment ago, Caleb had left in such a rush that he forgot to take the bank card with the betrothal gifts. I pulled it out once more and handed it back to Auntie with both hands. "What's this, Yuki?" she asked. "This is the betrothal gift from our family. I've decided to break off my engagement with Caleb, and I came to return the gift to you. Besides the betrothal gift, there's also 50,000 yen, which was meant for the engagement banquet, and the 150,000 yen you lent to our family. I will make sure to return it to you as soon as possible." Upon hearing that I wanted to end the engagement, Auntie quickly understood that the situation between Caleb and me was far more serious than a simple disagreement. "Yuki, tell me what happened. If that boy Caleb has wronged you, I'll make sure he pays for it. I'll break his legs and make him kneel in front of you to apologize. Please don't end the engagement." Honestly, I had once thought that marrying Caleb would be such a lucky thing for me. I believed that the typical mother in law daughter in law conflicts wouldn't happen with Caleb's mother, and she had always been so kind to me. Thinking about this made me feel reluctant to part with her. I explained everything to Auntie, telling her the full story, starting from the moment Caleb had told me that the past 7 years with me had just been him making do. Auntie's eyes were filled with disbelief. Yes, if I hadn't heard it with my own ears and seen it myself today, I would never have believed Caleb could be such a good actor. I then pulled out the photo Caleb had torn up. There weren't many pieces, and it could easily be put back together. This is a photo Caleb secretly kept at home, tucked behind a picture of the two of us in our bedroom, I explained. I took out my phone and showed Auntie the messages Caleb had sent me, one after the other. These are the messages he just sent me, I said, placing the wedding ring on the table. Even the wedding ring he bought for me has another girl's birthday engraved on it. I'm sorry, Auntie. I really can't pretend that everything is fine and marry him as if nothing happened. I couldn't stop the tears from falling as I lowered my head. Auntie, shocked by the messages where Caleb was threatening me, was visibly upset. Caleb kept sending messages, and Auntie couldn't take it anymore. She pressed the record button on her phone. Caleb, get home right now. If you dare go to Yuki's parents, let's see if your father will break your legs. Auntie handed the phone back to me with trembling hands. I looked up and saw that Auntie's eyes were also filled with tears. I'm sorry, Yuki. I no longer have the face to persuade you to marry into our family. It's my fault for not raising my son properly. I've wasted 7 years of your life, a good girl like you. I shook my head, holding Auntie's hand tightly. Auntie, I'm sorry too. I really wanted to be a part of your family. Auntie gently patted the back of my hand and looked at the bank card lying on the table. I'll take back the betrothal gift, Yuki. Even without the marriage contract, remember to keep in touch with Auntie often. I had expected Auntie to try to persuade me to forgive Caleb, but I was surprised when she supported my decision to end the engagement so easily. Sensing my surprise, Auntie smiled faintly. I don't know why, but when I first saw you, I liked you a lot. You have such a kind face. You're polite, filial, and sincere. I remember when your mother was sick, Caleb called you, and you told him not to tell me, worried I might give your family money. I thought at that time that you were really kind-hearted. Even though our family isn't rich, we still have some money. Asking your boyfriend for help would have been the most direct way, but you insisted on handling it by yourself. She paused, wiping away her tears. When my mother was sick, I was just as stubborn as you. I had a very hard time during that time, and my mother suffered even more. If Caleb's father hadn't helped, I don't know how many more years my mother could have lived. Auntie's eyes were filled with sympathy as she looked at me. My son betrayed you and wasted 7 years of your life. How could I have the face to ask you to marry into our family? You've already paid me back for your mother's medical expenses. Once your family situation improves, you can return it to me. By the way, the reason for canceling the engagement lies with Caleb's family. I'll transfer the money for the engagement banquet back to you shortly. Just deduct it from Caleb's savings. Also, I know I don't have the face to ask anything else, but for Caleb's career, I hope you can show some mercy. She continued, Caleb has no talent for business, so his parents wanted him to take the civil service exam for a stable job. I nodded. Okay, Auntie. After leaving Caleb's house, I informed Vivian that I was safe and headed home. Mom was cooking in the kitchen and Dad was helping her. When they saw me walk in, they simply smiled and said, There's soup on the stove, have some first. I stood by the kitchen door, nervously tugging at the hem of my clothes, feeling like a child who had done something wrong. I had thought that getting engaged to Caleb would ease my parents' worries, but it had only made them more anxious. Mom, Dad, I broke off the engagement with Caleb today and returned the betrothal gifts. The sounds of Mom stirring the food and Dad chopping vegetables paused for just a moment, but then they quickly resumed. Okay, take the bowls out. It's time to eat. After that, my parents never asked why I ended the engagement with Caleb, and I was relieved. Otherwise, knowing Dad's temper, he would have definitely gone to Caleb's house to confront him. Much later, I learned that Caleb had received a voice message from his mother that day. When he rushed home and found I had already left, he was beaten up by his father. Furious, he called my parents, saying offensive and even threatening things, like he would tie me up and take me home. Mom said that Dad had been so worried, thinking I was in danger, that he had gone out with a knife in hand. In the end, when he saw me taking a taxi back home, he rushed back and pretended to be chopping vegetables. He had only calmed down after seeing I was safe, and out of respect for Caleb's mother, he forced himself to pretend that nothing had happened. After breaking off the engagement, I had a period of peace. Caleb's colleagues and bosses at work had all learned about the situation and gave him a warning. Although they kept him employed, he was in a terrible mood and often waited for me outside my company. He confessed, apologized, and even kneeled in public to beg me to come back. He admitted that when we first got together, it was because I reminded him of Vivian. But after all these years, he no longer saw her in me. Later, he said, "When I met Vivian again, it was just a regret from my youth. But now, you are the only one in my heart." Caleb took out a new ring, different from the old one, with my initials and birthday engraved on it. "Yuki, can you give me another chance? Will you marry me?" 6 months had passed since we ended the engagement, but Caleb still hung around near my company. Every time he saw me, he would beg me to take him back, even proposing again. As I looked at him, I suddenly felt a little dazed. Was I this persistent when I begged him to marry me before? Back then, I was the one eager to get married, but now it was him who was begging. Still, every time I thought about spending my life with him, I felt disgusted. When I said this, Caleb's hand loosened from my wrist, falling dejectedly by his side. At that moment, a man in a suit stepped in front of me, blocking Caleb from view. "If I see you harassing Yuki again, I'll make sure she uses the law to protect herself," he said firmly. He then took my hand and led me away, right in front of Caleb. "Oh, by the way, this man is William, Vivian's older brother, and he's also a lawyer." Even after enduring a failed 7-year relationship, I still considered myself lucky. I was lucky to have learned the truth before marriage, to have seen Caleb's true character before stepping into the marriage hall with him. I was lucky that, despite everything, I didn't turn against his mother, but rather we became good friends, bridging the gap of age. And I was lucky to have met Vivian, Ethan, and William because of this ordeal. The end.